Michael Thompson stood by the large bay window of his modest home in Pasadena, California, gazing out at the neatly trimmed lawns and quiet streets of his suburban neighborhood. The morning sun cast a warm glow over the landscape, illuminating the vibrant colors of blooming flowers and the soft green of freshly mowed grass. Yet despite the beauty outside, Michael felt an overwhelming sense of emptiness within. At 65, Michael had once been a vibrant man, full of life and energy. His days were filled with the laughter of his wife, Emily, and the bustling activities of their two children. Together, they built a life grounded in love, mutual respect, and shared dreams. Emily, with her radiant smile and compassionate heart, was the cornerstone of Michael's existence. Her sudden passing 5 years ago had left a void that no one or nothing could fill. Each morning, Michael followed the same routine, a series of actions that offered little variation and even less stimulation. He would wake up early, the silence of the house pressing heavily on his ears. The absence of Emily's comforting presence was palpable, making even the simplest tasks feel burdensome. He would rise from his bed, stretch stiff muscles that years of limited activity had rendered, and prepare himself for another day of solitude. The first step of his day was always a morning walk. Michael laced up his worn sneakers, a gift from Emily on their 5th anniversary, and stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The neighborhood was still quiet, the only sounds being the chirping of birds and the distant hum of traffic. As he walked down the familiar streets, he greeted the occasional neighbor with a nod or a faint smile, though he rarely received more than a brief acknowledgement in return. His children, Sarah and David, lived in different cities, each with their own families and hectic schedules. Their visits were infrequent, and while cherished, they couldn't dispel the pervasive loneliness that clung to Michael like a shadow. Returning home, Michael would make his way to the kitchen, the heart of his empty house. He brewed a pot of coffee, the rich aroma filling the spaces that once echoed with Emily's presence. Sitting at the small kitchen table, he would read the morning newspaper, the headlines blurring into a monotonous backdrop. Sometimes he would skim through the pages, but often his mind wandered, lost in memories of the life he once had. Emily's face would flicker before his eyes as he remembered their conversations, her laughter ringing in his ears and the warmth of her hand in his. After breakfast, Michael's attention turned to his rooftop garden, a hobby he had cultivated in honor of Emily's love for gardening. The rooftop was his sanctuary, a place where he found solace amidst the blooms of roses, lilies, and daisies. Tending to the plants required a meticulous routine, watering, pruning, and ensuring each flower received the care it needed. The garden was a living tribute to Emily, a physical manifestation of the love and dedication she had poured into their shared life. Yet even this activity, which once brought him peace, now served as a constant reminder of her absence. The afternoons were the hardest. The house seemed to stretch endlessly, each room a testament to a life now lived in memories rather than reality. Michael would often find himself sitting on the porch swing, a book in hand, but rarely reading more than a few pages before his thoughts drifted back to Emily. He missed her terribly, the way she could make any task enjoyable, her unwavering support, and the way her presence filled every corner of their home with light and love. The weight of his solitude pressed down on him, making each day blend seamlessly into the next without distinction. Evenings were slightly more bearable, with the television providing a semblance of company. Michael would watch classic movies, a habit he and Emily had embraced in their younger years. The black and white scenes and familiar storylines offered a comforting routine, though the joy they once shared was muted by the shadow of grief. Occasionally he would find himself reaching for the remote to change the channel, seeking something different, some flicker of life to momentarily lift the gloom that clung to him. Despite his attempts to maintain structure, Michael couldn't escape the pervasive loneliness that defined his existence. The house, once vibrant with activity and laughter, was now silent, save for the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. Each tick-tock was a reminder of time passing without the presence of the woman he loved most. The emptiness was a constant companion, a void that no amount of routine or activity could seem to fill. On weekends, Michael would visit the local community center, hoping to engage in some social activities and perhaps find new connections. He enrolled in a pottery class, an endeavor he and Emily had discussed but never pursued together. The sessions were small, with only a handful of other seniors seeking solace and companionship. While he enjoyed the creative outlet, The conversations often hovered on superficial topics, failing to bridge the chasm left by Emily's departure. His children, Sarah and David, were supportive, but occupied with their own lives. Sarah, a graphic designer living in New York, often sent thoughtful gifts and messages, but the infrequency of their interactions left Michael feeling disconnected. David, an engineer based in Seattle, was the more distant of the two, rarely visiting except for major holidays. Their parents' passing had been a turning point for all of them, and while they each grieved in their own ways, the distance between them only amplified Michael's sense of isolation. One particularly quiet evening, as Michael sat alone in the living room, he gazed at the empty chair that once held Emily's favorite armchair. Her absence was most keenly felt in moments like these, when the house seemed to mourn alongside him. He reached out instinctively, as if trying to touch her silhouette, but only grasped empty air. The room felt colder without her warmth, every shadow a reminder of the life they had built together being now incomplete. On restless nights, Michael found himself wandering the house, searching for traces of Emily. He would stare at the photographs adorning the walls, each one capturing moments of joy and love, a testament to their enduring bond. The black and white photos from their early years, the vibrant family portraits, and candid shots of them laughing together, all served as vivid reminders of what he had lost. He often wondered if Emily felt the same emptiness, if she missed him as deeply as he missed her. As the seasons changed, so did Michael's outlook on life. The vibrant blooms of spring gave way to the scorching heat of summer, followed by the crisp coolness of autumn and the icy grip of winter. Each season brought its own set of challenges and reflections, yet Michael remained steadfast in his routine, finding comfort in the predictability it offered. However, deep down he yearned for something more, a spark to reignite the passion and joy that once defined his existence. One evening, as Michael sat in his beloved rooftop garden, he watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. The serenity of the moment was interrupted by the faint sound of a dog barking in the distance. He frowned, unsure where the noise was coming from. The neighborhood was usually quiet at this hour, and the unexpected bark unsettled him. He decided to investigate, hoping to find nothing more than a stray animal wandering the streets. As he approached the source of the sound, he noticed a commotion near the house across the street. A small crowd had gathered, and the air was thick with tension and concern. Curious and slightly apprehensive, Michael drew closer, recognizing the familiar faces of his neighbors. Among them was Mrs. Johnson, the kind-hearted widow who often shared gardening tips and homemade pies with him. "Michael, thank goodness you're here," Mrs. Johnson called out as he approached. "It's a terrible situation with poor Brave." "What's going on?" Michael asked, his concern piqued. "It's that neighbor's dog," she replied, her voice tinged with anxiety. "He hasn't been taking care of him properly, and now the poor thing is in a terrible state." Michael's heart sank as he looked towards the house in question. There, perched precariously on the roof, was a frail-looking dog. Its ribs were visible beneath matted fur, and it dangled dangerously from a rusty chain. The dog's eyes were wide with fear and pleading for help. Michael felt a surge of empathy and frustration. He couldn't stand by and watch an innocent animal suffer. Determined to help, Michael took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He knew that intervening would not be easy, but the thought of Brave enduring such misery was unbearable. The routine that had become his refuge suddenly felt inadequate, highlighting the profound loneliness and lack of meaningful connections in his life. This moment, fraught with urgency and emotion, marked the beginning of a journey that would challenge Michael in ways he had never imagined. As the golden hues of the sunset gave way to the cool blues of twilight, Michael made a silent vow to rescue Brave. Little did he know, this act of compassion would not only save a life, but also rekindle a sense of purpose and community that he had long thought lost. Michael Thompson sat quietly in his favorite armchair, the one he and Emily had spent countless evenings curled up together. The room was filled with the soft hum of the early afternoon, sunlight streaming through the windows and casting gentle patterns on the hardwood floor. Yet despite the serene setting, Michael felt a lingering emptiness that no amount of domestic tranquility could alleviate. His children, Sarah and David, lived in bustling cities far from Pasadena, Sarah in New York and David in Chicago. They kept in regular contact through phone calls and video chats, sharing snippets of their busy lives and expressing their love and support. However, the physical distance between them left Michael yearning for more substantial connections, for the warmth of their presence to light up his quiet home. The infrequent visits, though cherished, often accentuated his sense of solitude. On most weekends, Michael found himself reminiscing about the vibrant household they once had. The laughter of his grandchildren, Ethan and Liam, echoed in his mind like a comforting refrain. Both boys, aged 7 and 5 respectively, had always been sources of immense joy and energy in Michael's life. Their playful antics and boundless curiosity had a way of infusing his days with purpose and happiness. Every time Michael heard the sound of the mailbox being checked, or saw the car pulling into the driveway, his heart would race with anticipation. He meticulously prepared for their visits, ensuring that the house was spotless and that there were plenty of activities planned to keep the boys entertained. He'd set up the dining table with their favorite snacks, lay out their toys, and arrange chairs on the porch swing for story time. When Ethan and Liam arrived, their excitement was palpable. The boys would race to Michael, hugging him tightly and showering him with questions about their voyage from New York or Chicago. Michael couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm, feeling a burst of energy that made the house feel alive once more. "Mama made your favorite cookies," Michael would announce, leading them to the kitchen where warm, gooey treats awaited. The boys' eyes would light up with delight as they eagerly reached for the first bite, their laughter filling the room as crumbs danced around them. These moments were precious, offering Michael a temporary reprieve from his lingering loneliness. Afternoons were often spent in the backyard where Michael had created a miniature paradise for the boys. They built forts from old blankets and chairs, pretending to be explorers on grand adventures. Ethan, with his imaginative mind, would lead the expeditions, while Liam, ever the cheerful one, would follow closely, his giggles echoing through the air. Michael watched them with a mix of pride and nostalgia, reminiscing about the times when Emily had nursed the boys through illnesses or read them bedtime stories. One particularly sunny Saturday, Michael decided to introduce Ethan and Liam to his rooftop garden. It had been Emily's pride and joy, a place where she expressed her creativity and passion for flowers. Michael had continued tending to it, finding solace in the blooming roses and fragrant lilies that reminded him of his wife's enduring spirit. As they climbed the small staircase leading to the rooftop, the boys squealed in delight. The garden was a riot of colors, with blooms of every hue and varieties of plants that Michael had carefully nurtured. "Wow, Grandpa, this is amazing!" Ethan exclaimed, his eyes wide with wonder. Liam darted around, poking at the petals of a particularly vibrant marigold. "Can we help, Grandpa?" he asked, his voice filled with eagerness. Michael felt a swell of happiness as he began to show them the different plants, explaining how each required specific care. Together they watered the flowers, trimmed the dying petals, and even planted a few new seeds that Michael had brought home. The boys' genuine interest and enthusiasm made the garden come alive, the air filled with their laughter and the gentle rustling of leaves. As the day wore on, Michael realized how much these visits meant to him. The boys didn't just bring temporary happiness, they rekindled a sense of purpose and connection that he had been missing. Their presence reminded him of Emily, not with sorrow, but with the joy and love she had infused into his life. Through Ethan and Liam, Michael felt a bond that transcended the years of solitude, a connection that gave his days meaning once more. In the evenings, after the boys had been fed and tucked into bed, Michael would often find himself reflecting on the profound impact of their visits. He marveled at how a few days could rejuvenate his spirit, filling the empty spaces in his heart with warmth and gratitude. The house, once a haven of silence, now echoed with the memories of their laughter and the love he felt watching them grow. One memorable evening, as Michael sat on the porch swing with Ethan and Liam, he shared stories of Emily's kindness and their shared adventures. The boys listened intently, asking questions and hanging on every word. Michael felt a rush of emotion as he spoke, realizing that through these stories, he kept Emily's memory alive and taught the boys about the strength and resilience that defined their family. A few weeks into their visit, Michael decided to take the boys to a local park, hoping to create new memories together. The park was a bustling oasis of activity, with children playing on the swings, couples walking hand in hand, and families enjoying picnics under the shade of large oak trees. Michael watched as Ethan and Liam darted towards the playground, their faces alight with excitement. He followed them from a distance, allowing them the freedom to explore and play, while he sat on a nearby bench, occasionally joining in their games. They climbed the jungle gym, raced down slides, and played tag until the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. As they sat together on the grass, breathing in the cool evening air, Michael felt a deep sense of contentment wash over him. "Grandpa, you're the best," Ethan declared, tossing a pebble into the pond. Liam nodded in agreement, smiling up at Michael. "We had so much fun today." Michael couldn't help but return their affection with a warm smile. "I had a great time too, guys. I'm glad you came to visit." As the boys scampered back to the house for dinner, Michael lingered for a moment, gazing at the sky. He realized that while his children's physical absence was a constant ache, the presence of Ethan and Liam brought light into his life, mending the fractures of his solitude with threads of joy and love. The week flew by, filled with countless moments of happiness and connection. Michael cherished every second, knowing that these visits were temporary, yet invaluable. He began looking forward to their arrival with renewed anticipation, finding solace in the routine that their presence provided. The house, which once seemed unbearably quiet, now resonated with the echoes of their laughter and the warmth of shared experiences. As Sunday dawned, signaling the end of their stay, Michael felt a bittersweet mixture of emotions. He was grateful for the time spent with his grandsons, but the impending silence after their departure weighed heavily on him. During their last evening, as they sat together on the porch, Michael promised to continue cherishing these moments and hoped for more visits in the future. "Grandpa, we can come whenever you want," Ethan assured him, hugging his arm. Liam nodded enthusiastically. "We'll make sure to visit again soon." Michael felt a lump in his throat, touched by their promise. "I'd like that very much. You both mean the world to me." As the boys left, their laughter lingering in the air, Michael sat back in his armchair, a sense of fulfillment enveloping him. The small joys brought by Ethan and Liam had rekindled a spark within him, reminding him that even in the depths of loneliness, moments of happiness and connection could be found. Their visits had not only brought laughter and life back into his home, but it also strengthened his ties to his family and community, giving him hope for brighter days ahead. Michael knew that his life would continue to be a blend of routine and occasional bursts of joy, but now he carried with him the lasting memories of his grandson's visits. They had shown him that love and connection could bridge the gaps left by loss and distance, and that even in solitude, one could find moments of profound happiness. As he looked out the window one last time, the sun setting on another day, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose and an unshakable belief in the enduring power of family and love. Michael Thompson was savoring his morning cereal, a simple yet satisfying meal that had become a staple of his daily routine. The kitchen was quiet, the soft hum of the refrigerator providing a comforting backdrop to his solitary breakfast. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the familiar surroundings of his home in Pasadena, California. As he took another bite of his oatmeal, the rhythmic clinking of his spoon against the bowl was a soothing reminder of the life he had built, and the life he now led alone. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the peaceful silence was abruptly interrupted by the insistent ringing of his smartphone lying on the kitchen counter. Michael frowned, slightly irritated by the disturbance so early in the day. He reached out, reluctantly setting aside his bowl, and picked up the phone. The screen displayed a message notification from Mrs. Johnson, his elderly neighbor who lived just a few houses down the street. Michael had always appreciated her friendly check-ins and the occasional homemade pie she would share during holidays. "Morning, Michael," the message began, followed by a brief note. "You need to see this. It's about Brave." Curiosity piqued. Michael tapped on the attachment that accompanied the message. The screen flickered to reveal a series of alarming photos. A dog, clearly malnourished and visibly distressed, was tethered tightly to a dilapidated fence in the neighbor's yard. The poor creature's ribs protruded sharply beneath matted fur, and its eyes held a haunting mix of fear and desperation. The final image showed a fragment of the owner's scribbled note, ominously simple: "No more money." Michael's heart sank as he took in the sight of Brave. The animal's suffering was palpable, each image more distressing than the last. He could almost hear the muted whimpers and feel the tension emanating from the photographs. His immediate reaction was one of anger and helplessness. How could someone treat a living being with such cruelty? He glanced at the clock. It was still early, but the day had just begun, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do something. Grabbing his coat from the back of his chair, Michael moved swiftly yet calmly, determined to address the situation without delay. Stepping outside, the fresh morning air filled his lungs, momentarily easing the tension knotting his shoulders. Mrs. Johnson was waiting on her porch, her expression etched with worry and frustration. Her silver hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her hands were clasped tightly around a steaming cup of tea. "Good morning, Michael," she greeted, her voice tinged with urgency. "Thank you for responding so quickly." Michael nodded, his jaw set with resolve. "Of course, Mrs. Johnson. What's going on with Brave?" She handed him another set of photos she had taken moments before, capturing the immediate aftermath of the abuse. Michael felt a pang in his chest as he reviewed them, the images more recent and even more harrowing than the initial ones sent via text. "He's been going through a tough time," Mrs. Johnson explained, her eyes darting nervously towards the street. "His owner, Mr. Davis, has been struggling financially, and I think his patience has run out. Brave hasn't been treated well for months, but it's gotten worse recently." Michael's mind raced. He had always admired animals and felt a deep sense of compassion for their well-being. The thought of Brave's suffering was unbearable. He glanced around, noting that Mr. Davis had moved away unexpectedly, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and neglected responsibilities. "We can't just leave him like this," Michael stated firmly, his protective instincts kicking into high gear. "We need to help Brave." Mrs. Johnson nodded, her relief evident. "I agree, but I'm not sure what to do. I don't think Mr. Davis will come back anytime soon, and I'm worried Brave won't survive much longer at this rate." Michael took a deep breath, contemplating their options. Contacting animal control was an obvious choice, but based on prior experiences, he knew that bureaucratic delays could mean the difference between life and death for an animal in distress. Without hesitation, he made a decision. "Let's go take a look ourselves," Michael suggested. "If Brave is in immediate danger, we can't wait for assistance that might not come in time." Mrs. Johnson looked uncertain but nodded in agreement. "All right, but we should be cautious. We don't know how Mr. Davis might react if he returns." They made their way to Mr. Davis's house, a modest, weathered structure that showed signs of neglect. Michael approached the front door, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. Mrs. Johnson followed closely behind, both of them acutely aware of the potential risks involved. Michael knocked firmly, waiting for a response that never came. The silence that greeted them was unnerving. Exchanging a worried glance, Michael decided to proceed cautiously. He pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest, and stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The interior was cluttered with stacks of newspapers, empty food containers, and discarded clothing strewn across the floor. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and neglect. Michael's eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of Mr. Davis or Brave. "There he is," Mrs. Johnson whispered, pointing towards the back of the house. Michael followed her gaze and saw Brave, tethered to a rusty metal pole, lying on the cold, hard ground. The dog's ribs were starkly visible, and its coat was matted and dirty. It struggled weakly against the chain, its eyes pleading for help. Michael knelt down, reaching out slowly to avoid startling the already terrified animal. "Hey there, Brave," he spoke softly, extending a hand in a gesture of comfort. Brave looked up hesitantly, eyes filled with fear and desperation. Without warning, a loud crash echoed through the house as Mr. Davis burst through the doorway, his face contorted with anger and frustration. "What are you doing here?" he barked, glaring at Michael and Mrs. Johnson. Michael stood up, maintaining a calm demeanor despite the tension. "Mr. Davis, we're here to help Brave. He's suffering, and we can't just leave him like this." Mr. Davis took a step forward, his eyes darting between the dog and the two women. "He's my dog. I can take care of him," he snapped, trying to mask his own frustration and guilt. "But you're not," Michael replied firmly. "Look at him, Mr. Davis. He's malnourished and injured. He needs medical attention, and he shouldn't be kept in these conditions." Mr. Davis's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from his posture. "I've been having a hard time," he admitted, his voice wavering. "I lost my job a few months ago, and things just spiraled out of control. I didn't mean for this to happen." Understanding flickered in Michael's eyes. He recognized the weight of loss and the struggle to rebuild a life, having experienced deep grief himself. "I'm sorry you're going through this," he said compassionately, "but continuing to neglect Brave is not the answer. Let us help you and Brave." Mrs. Johnson stepped forward, her presence providing Michael with additional support. "We can find a solution together. Maybe there's a way to get him the care he needs and help you through this tough time. Mr. Davis looked down, conflicted emotions playing across his face. After a long, tense moment, he sighed deeply. I don't know what to do, he confessed. I just can't keep him like this anymore. Michael felt a surge of determination. Then let's figure it out. We can help you arrange for veterinary care and explore options for Brave's future. You don't have to do this alone. There was a flicker of hope in Mr. Davis's eyes, a promise of better days to come. Thank you, he murmured, the anger and frustration giving way to a more vulnerable admission of his struggles. With Mr. Davis's reluctant agreement, Michael and Mrs. Johnson began the process of helping Brave. They contacted the local animal rescue organization, explaining the severity of Brave's condition and the urgent need for assistance. Arrangements were made for a veterinarian to visit the house and provide the necessary medical care. As they waited for the veterinary team to arrive, Michael took a seat on the worn-out sofa, casting a sympathetic glance at Mr. Davis. You know, you don't have to face this alone, he said gently. There are resources available to help you through this difficult time. Mr. Davis nodded, albeit hesitantly. I appreciate that. I just didn't know where to turn. Michael placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We'll get through this together. Brave will be okay, and so will you. The veterinary team arrived promptly, assessing Brave's condition with professional efficiency. The dog, despite its weakened state, showed signs of relief at their presence. As Brave was gently lifted and carried away for treatment, Michael felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him. They had taken the first crucial step in alleviating the suffering of an innocent animal, but more importantly, they had extended a lifeline to someone in need. As Michael and Mrs. Johnson walked back to their respective homes, the weight of the morning's events began to lift. The sun was now high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that even in the depths of loneliness, meaningful connections and acts of kindness could emerge. That evening, Michael sat in his favorite armchair once more. But this time, it felt different. There was a sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had made a positive impact on both Brave's life and Mr. Davis's. He reflected on the day's events, recognizing that his routine had been momentarily disrupted by an opportunity to reach out and make a difference. As he sipped his evening tea, Michael contemplated the fragile nature of life and the importance of community support. He had always admired Emily's compassionate spirit, and in saving Brave, he had inadvertently channeled a piece of her legacy. The act had not only alleviated the suffering of a helpless animal, but it also sparked a sense of connection that he had been yearning for. Later that night, Michael found himself lying in bed staring at the ceiling. The images of Brave's suffering lingered in his mind, but so did the satisfaction of having taken action. He realized that while his days were often filled with routine and solitude, moments like these infused his life with meaning and purpose. The decision to help Brave had opened a door to new possibilities, reminding him that even in the quietest of lives, there were opportunities to create ripples of change. With a contented sigh, Michael closed his eyes, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but he knew he was no longer as isolated as he had been. The bonds of community and the strength drawn from helping others, both human and animal, were beginning to weave a new tapestry of connection and hope in his life. As he drifted into sleep, Michael felt a gentle assurance that his actions today had set him on a path towards healing and renewal. The kindness he had extended to Brave not only saved a life, but also rekindled the warmth and compassion that had always been a part of who he was. In that quiet moment, he embraced the possibility of brighter days ahead, buoyed by the knowledge that even the smallest acts of empathy could lead to profound transformations. Michael Thompson felt a surge of adrenaline course through his veins as he listened to the details Mrs. Johnson had shared earlier. The thought of Brave, a life hanging in the balance, ignited a determination he hadn't felt in years. Without a second thought, he reached for his worn leather coat hanging by the hallway door. The fabric was soft from years of use, a comforting reminder of the life he and Emily had built together. Slipping it on swiftly, he glanced back at Mrs. Johnson, who was already moving towards the house in distress. "We need to act quickly," Michael said, his voice steady despite the anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. Mrs. Johnson nodded in agreement, her eyes reflecting the same urgency. Together they hurried out the front door, the cool morning air biting at their faces as they made their way toward Mr. Davis's house. The neighborhood had already started to stir, the peaceful morning now tinged with tension as a small crowd gathered near the fence where Brave was being held. Michael's heart pounded in his chest as he approached the scene, the sight before him both heartbreaking and infuriating. Brave, a once vibrant and energetic dog, was now gaunt and trembling, his ribs protruding sharply beneath his matted fur. The rusted chain that tethered him to the fence was the last line of defense preventing him from plummeting down from the precarious height of the roof. "Poor Brave," Michael muttered, kneeling down to get a closer look. The dog's eyes were wide with fear, and his whimpers pierced through the morning calm, eliciting a deep sense of compassion in Michael. He reached for his phone, intending to call the authorities, but the process of reporting seemed interminable. Minutes felt like hours, and the urgency of Brave's situation left him restless. "Michael, we need to do something now," Mrs. Johnson urged, her voice tight with concern. Michael nodded, his resolve hardening. "You're right. We can't wait any longer." Standing up, Michael took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He knew that intervening directly carried risks, but the sight of Brave's suffering left him with no other choice. Determined, he approached the fence, careful not to startle the already frightened dog. "Hey there, Brave," Michael spoke softly, trying to soothe the animal. "I'm here to help you." Brave's ears twitched, and he let out a small whine, his eyes searching Michael's face for reassurance. Michael could see the desperation in those eyes and knew he had to act swiftly. Scanning the area, Michael noted the height at which Brave was hanging. The roof was steep, and the chain showed signs of significant wear, making it likely that it could give way at any moment. The situation was dire. Without hesitation, Michael placed a hand on the back of the fence, testing its sturdiness. It held firm, but he knew it wouldn't remain that way for long. "Mrs. Johnson, stay back," he instructed gently, his mind racing to devise a plan. He glanced around, hoping to spot something that could aid in the rescue. Nearby, a sturdy ladder leaned against Mr. Davis's shed, partially obscured by overgrown weeds. It was a long shot, but it might be their best option. "Do you think that ladder can hold us?" Michael asked, nodding towards the shed. Mrs. Johnson hesitated but agreed, understanding the gravity of the situation. Michael carefully positioned the ladder against the fence, ensuring it was secure. He turned to face Brave, holding out his arm as a sign of peace. "It's okay, Brave. I'm going to get you down." The dog took a cautious step towards him, his body still tense from fear and neglect. With a deep breath, Michael began to climb the ladder, each rung a testament to his determination. The height was unnerving, and the sun reflected off the metal, creating a blinding glare. He focused on the task at hand, his mind blocking out the swirling emotions of loneliness and sorrow that often plagued him. Halfway up, Michael reached out to steady himself, his fingers grazing the rough wood of the fence. Brave's whimpers grew louder, a stark reminder of the time slipping away. Michael quickened his pace, his heart racing in his chest. As he neared the top, he could see the wear on the chain more clearly. It was barely holding Brave in place. Finally, Michael reached the spot where Brave was tethered. He extended his arms, trying to create a semblance of trust. "Brave, come to me. I'm here to help." The dog hesitated for a moment before fluttering his eyes upwards, recognizing the sincerity in Michael's gaze. Gently, Michael grasped Brave's collar, feeling the roughness of his fur against his skin. "All right, buddy, let's get you down." He began to untangle the rusted chain, his fingers working swiftly despite the trembling in his hands. The process was slow, each link yielding to his persistent effort. Brave remained still, his body sagging from exhaustion and fear. As the chain freed, Michael carefully lowered Brave down the ladder, ensuring that the dog had a secure grip before fully detaching. Brave hesitated at the edge, his eyes wide with uncertainty, but trust flickered in their depths. With a final reassuring word, Michael helped Brave settle safely on the ground below. "Good boy," Michael whispered, relief flooding his system as the dog finally came to life, tail wagging weakly but still intact. Mrs. Johnson rushed forward, her hands reaching out to comfort both Michael and Brave. Together, they guided the dog away from the dangerous fence, ensuring he was safe and secure. Standing beside him, Michael felt a profound sense of accomplishment and connection. The act of saving Brave had not only alleviated the suffering of an innocent animal, but it also reignited a spark within him, a reminder that his life's purpose extended beyond his own loneliness. The bond formed in that moment between man and dog was a testament to the enduring power of compassion and courage. "Let's get you some help, Brave," Michael said, gently patting the dog's head. They made their way to the nearby veterinary clinic, the sun now fully risen and casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. The journey felt lighter, the burden of solitude less heavy as Michael walked alongside Mrs. Johnson, with Brave trotting happily by their side. At the clinic, the veterinarian quickly assessed Brave's condition, praising Michael for his swift and decisive action. "You've done a remarkable thing today," the vet commended. "Brave is going to be okay thanks to you." As they waited for Brave to receive the necessary care, Michael found himself reflecting on the morning's events. The rescue had been more than just a physical act. It was a pivotal moment of emotional healing. The routine that had once confined him to a life of predictable solitude was now open to new experiences and connections. Helping Brave had opened a door to a community that Michael had been hesitant to embrace, but now it felt inviting and full of potential. Mrs. Johnson sat beside him, sharing stories of Brave's playful nature before his decline. "He used to love chasing squirrels in the yard," she said with a wistful smile. "It's heartbreaking to see him like this." Michael reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We're going to make sure he gets the help he needs. No one should have to suffer like this." As the day progressed, Brave began to show signs of improvement, his eyes brightening and his steps becoming more confident. Michael watched with a sense of fulfillment, knowing that his actions had made a tangible difference. The bond between them was undeniable, a connection that transcended words and bridged the gap between human and animal. In the following days, Michael continued to visit Brave at the clinic, helping with his recovery and forming a deeper bond with the resilient dog. These visits became a cornerstone of his life, providing structure and a renewed sense of purpose. The once monotonous routine was now punctuated with moments of joy and the satisfaction of nurturing another life. Brave's recovery also sparked conversations and interactions with others in the community. Neighbors who had previously been distant now smiled and greeted Michael warmly, inspired by his selfless act. The small town of Pasadena began to feel more like a supportive network, each person contributing to the collective well-being. One afternoon, as Michael sat in the clinic waiting for Brave's progress report, a young woman approached him. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice hesitant yet hopeful. "I heard about what you did for Brave. I volunteer at the animal shelter nearby. If you're interested, we could use someone with your experience and compassion." Michael felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in a long time. "I'd be honored to help," he replied, the idea of contributing to the community resonating deeply within him. Over the next few weeks, Michael became actively involved with the animal shelter, dedicating his time to caring for other animals in need. The routine that once felt monotonous was now filled with meaningful interactions and the joy of making a difference. Each rescue mission, each wagging tail, and each grateful gaze from the animals reaffirmed his decision to act that morning. Brave's presence at home brought a new dynamic to Michael's life. The dog, once a symbol of suffering, now embodied hope and resilience. They went on daily walks together, exploring the neighborhood and meeting new people. Michael found himself engaging more with his neighbors, attending community events, and forging friendships that bridged the gaps years of isolation had created. One evening, as Michael sat on his porch with Brave curled up beside him, he reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple act of courage. The morning's distress had led to a series of events that transformed his life, turning loneliness into connection and routine into purpose. The bond he shared with Brave was a testament to the unexpected ways life could change, offering new paths and opportunities for growth. In saving Brave, Michael had not only rescued a beloved friend, but had also found a renewed sense of self and a deeper connection to those around him. The journey had been challenging, filled with moments of fear and uncertainty, but it had ultimately led to a place of healing and community. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over Pasadena, Michael knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with love, compassion, and the unwavering spirit of a man who dared to make a difference. Michael stood outside the dilapidated house, his heart pounding as he stared at the peeling paint and broken windows. The air was thick with tension, and the faint sound of Brave's whimpers from the backyard only fueled his determination. He clenched his fists, his mind racing with thoughts of what he might encounter inside. The house belonged to Mr. Davis, a man whose reputation in the neighborhood was less than stellar. Known for his erratic behavior and heavy drinking, Mr. Davis had become a source of unease for many of the residents. But Michael wasn't here to judge the man. He was here to save Brave. Without hesitation, Michael stepped up to the front door and knocked firmly. The sound echoed through the house, but there was no response. He knocked again, harder this time, his patience wearing thin. "Mr. Davis," he called out, his voice steady but loud enough to be heard. "We need to talk about Brave. Open the door." Still, there was no answer. Michael's jaw tightened as he glanced back at the small crowd of neighbors that had gathered at a safe distance. Among them was a young man named Alex, a college student who had recently moved into the neighborhood. Alex had been one of the first to notice Brave's deteriorating condition and had alerted Mrs. Johnson, who then informed Michael. Now Alex stood with his arms crossed, his face a mixture of concern and frustration. Michael turned back to the door and pounded on it with his fist. "Mr. Davis, I know you're in there," he shouted. "You can't keep ignoring this. Brave needs help, and we're not leaving until we get him out of here." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open. Mr. Davis stood in the doorway, his disheveled appearance a stark contrast to the bright morning light. His eyes were bloodshot, and the stench of alcohol wafted from him, making Michael take a step back. A half-empty bottle of whiskey dangled from his hand, and his expression was one of irritation and defiance. "What do you want?" Mr. Davis slurred, leaning against the doorframe for support. "I don't have time for this." Michael took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. "We're here about Brave," he said firmly. "He's in terrible condition, and it's clear he's not being cared for properly. You need to let us take him." Mr. Davis's face twisted into a sneer. "Brave is my dog," he snapped. "I'll take care of him however I see fit. It's none of your business." "It is our business," Michael shot back, his voice rising. "You've neglected him to the point where he's barely surviving. He's malnourished, injured, and terrified. This isn't about ownership. It's about doing what's right." Mr. Davis took a swig from his bottle, his eyes narrowing as he stepped closer to Michael. "You think you can just come here and tell me how to take care of my dog?" he growled. "You don't know anything about me or my life." Michael stood his ground, refusing to be intimidated. "I don't need to know your life story to see that Brave is suffering," he said. "If you can't take care of him, then let someone else do it. This isn't about you, it's about him." The tension between the two men was palpable, and the small crowd of neighbors watched anxiously from a distance. Alex, sensing that the situation was escalating, stepped forward. "Mr. Davis," he said, his tone calm but firm, "we're not here to fight with you. We just want to help Brave. Please let us take him to a vet. He needs medical attention." Mr. Davis turned his glare to Alex, his grip tightening on the whiskey bottle. "And who the hell are you?" he spat. "Some kid who thinks he knows everything? Stay out of this." Alex didn't flinch. "I'm someone who cares about animals," he replied. "And I'm not going to stand by and watch Brave suffer." Michael felt a surge of gratitude for Alex's courage. Together, they presented a united front, refusing to back down despite Mr. Davis's hostility. But it was clear that reasoning with the man was getting them nowhere. Brave's cries from the backyard grew louder, a heartbreaking reminder of the urgency of the situation. "Enough of this," Michael said, his voice firm. "If you're not going to help Brave, then we will." He turned to Alex. "Do you see that ladder over there?" he asked, nodding toward the shed in the backyard. Alex followed his gaze and nodded. "Yeah, I see it." "Grab it," Michael instructed. "We're getting Brave down." Alex hesitated for a moment, glancing at Mr. Davis, who was now shouting incoherently about trespassing and calling the police. But Michael's determination was unwavering, and Alex quickly moved to retrieve the ladder. The crowd of neighbors murmured among themselves, some expressing concern while others voiced their support for Michael and Alex's actions. As Alex carried the ladder to the backyard, Michael followed closely behind, his focus entirely on Brave. The dog was still hanging precariously from the roof, his rusted chain the only thing keeping him from falling. Brave's eyes were wide with fear, and his whimpers cut through the air like a knife. "Hang on, Brave," Michael said softly, his voice filled with both urgency and reassurance. "We're coming to get you." Alex set up the ladder against the side of the house, making sure it was stable before stepping back. "Be careful," he said, his voice tinged with worry. Michael nodded, gripping the sides of the ladder as he began to climb. Each step felt like an eternity, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on his shoulders. He could hear Mr. Davis shouting from the front yard, but he blocked it out, focusing solely on Brave. When he reached the top, Michael carefully extended a hand toward the dog, "It's okay, Brave," he said gently. "I'm here to help you." Brave flinched at first, his body trembling with fear, but as Michael continued to speak softly, the dog seemed to sense that he was safe. Slowly, Brave allowed Michael to untangle the chain from the rusted hook that had held him captive. "You're going to be okay," Michael whispered, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I've got you." With the chain finally free, Michael carefully lifted Brave into his arms. The dog was lighter than he expected, a testament to how malnourished he had become. Michael held him close, shielding him from the height as he began to descend the ladder. When they reached the ground, the crowd erupted into applause, their relief and admiration evident. Alex stepped forward to help Michael steady Brave, his hands gentle as he examined the dog's condition. "You did it," Alex said, a small smile breaking through the tension. "You got him." Michael nodded, his eyes fixed on Brave. "We got him," he corrected, his voice filled with gratitude for Alex's support. As they carried Brave away from the house, Mr. Davis continued to shout, but his words were drowned out by the collective voices of the neighbors who rallied around Michael and Alex. Some offered to call animal control, while others volunteered to help transport Brave to the nearest veterinary clinic. For the first time in a long time, Michael felt a sense of unity within the community. Together, they had stood up against cruelty and made a difference in Brave's life. As he looked down at the dog in his arms, Michael felt a surge of hope, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, compassion and courage could prevail. Brave let out a soft whimper, his eyes meeting Michael's with a mixture of exhaustion and trust. In that moment, Michael knew that this was only the beginning of their journey together. But for now, Brave was safe, and that was all that mattered. Michael Thompson felt a mixture of relief and worry as he cradled Brave in his arms. The once frail and trembling dog was now safe in his grasp, thanks to the combined efforts of Mrs. Johnson, Alex, and the supportive neighbors who had rallied around him. The applause from the crowd still echoed in his ears as he made his way towards the nearest veterinary clinic, determined to give Brave the care he desperately needed. The drive to the clinic was a blur of flashing streetlights and passing houses. Michael's mind was consumed with thoughts of Brave's condition, severe malnutrition, multiple injuries, and the lingering fear in the dog's eyes. He glanced over at Brave, who was now lying peacefully against his chest, exhausted from the ordeal, but gradually regaining some strength. The bond between them had formed in those tense moments, a silent understanding that they were both seeking solace from their respective pains. Upon arriving at the clinic, Michael was greeted by the receptionist, a young woman named Laura, who looked up with genuine concern upon seeing the state of Brave. "You did a great thing bringing him in," she said softly. "We'll take good care of him." Laura quickly ushered them into an examination room where Dr. Ramirez, a compassionate veterinarian, awaited. The room was filled with the soothing scents of antiseptics and the soft hum of medical equipment designed to create a calm environment for both animals and their owners. Dr. Ramirez approached Michael and Brave with a warm smile, immediately putting Michael at ease. "Let's take a look at Brave," Dr. Ramirez said gently, beginning a thorough examination. Michael watched anxiously as the vet checked Brave's vitals, noted his injuries, and assessed his overall condition. The dog winced slightly as Dr. Ramirez carefully examined a deep gash on his hind leg, but otherwise remained calm, trusting Michael's presence. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Ramirez looked up and met Michael's eyes. "Brave is in bad shape, but he's going to be okay. He's suffering from severe malnutrition and several injuries that need immediate attention. We'll need to run some tests and start treatment right away." Michael nodded, a surge of determination replacing his earlier anxiety. "Do whatever you need to do. I just want him to be okay." Over the next few days, Michael found himself frequently visiting the clinic. Each visit was filled with updates from Dr. Ramirez and the veterinary team, who worked tirelessly to nurse Brave back to health. Michael's initial feelings of loneliness and purposelessness began to shift as he invested more time in Brave's recovery. The act of caring for another living being, especially one that had been so deeply affected by neglect, brought a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in years. Brave's transformation was remarkable. From a gaunt and broken creature, he began to regain his strength and vitality. The wound slowly healed, and his coat, once matted and dirty, started to shine with health. Michael spent hours at the clinic, feeding Brave nutritious meals, cleaning his wounds, and providing the gentle affection the dog craved. In return, Brave offered unwavering loyalty and affection, his once fearful eyes now filled with gratitude and trust. One afternoon, as Michael sat by Brave's kennel, watching the dog sleep peacefully, Laura approached him with a warm smile. "He's doing great today," she announced. "Dr. Ramirez says he's making excellent progress." Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him. "That's wonderful to hear. I can't thank you all enough for helping him." Laura nodded. "It's our pleasure. Brave's a special dog, and you were right to save him." As the days turned into weeks, Michael's bond with Brave deepened. Their morning walks became a cherished routine, providing Michael with fresh air and a sense of purpose. Together, they explored the neighborhood, Brave's playful spirit reigniting Michael's long-dormant zest for life. Neighbors who had once seemed distant now greeted Michael with smiles and friendly conversations, inspired by his dedication to helping another living being. Michael began to notice subtle changes within himself. The loneliness that had once weighed heavily on him began to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of connection and community. His interactions with Mrs. Johnson, Alex, and the other neighbors became more frequent and meaningful. They shared stories, offered support, and even joined Michael and Brave on their walks, turning solitary moments into shared experiences. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink hues, Michael sat on his porch with Brave curled up beside him. He reflected on the journey that had brought them together, the rescue, the treatment, and the healing that followed. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional and spiritual as well. Brave had become more than just a rescued dog. He was a symbol of hope and resilience, a beacon guiding Michael towards a brighter future. Michael's visits to the clinic had also introduced him to Dr. Ramirez, who had become a trusted friend. They often discussed Brave's progress and shared stories of their lives outside the clinic walls. Michael found himself opening up about his grief and the absence of his wife, Emily, while Dr. Ramirez provided both professional advice and personal empathy. These conversations further alleviated Michael's sense of isolation, reinforcing the importance of community and human connection. One particularly chilly afternoon, as winter began to set in, Michael noticed a change in Brave's demeanor. The dog seemed more energetic, eager to play and interact. Michael couldn't help but smile as he tossed a ball across the yard, watching Brave sprint after it with boundless enthusiasm. The transformation was complete. Brave was no longer a victim of cruelty, but a thriving, happy companion. During one of their walks, Michael and Brave stumbled upon a local animal rescue event. Vibrant banners fluttered in the breeze, and volunteers were busy setting up booths to promote animal welfare and adoption. Michael felt a surge of inspiration as he watched families and individuals show their love for animals, much like he had with Brave. The event was a testament to the power of community and the impact of compassionate actions. Moved by the experience, Michael decided to get involved. He began volunteering at the event, helping other animals in need and sharing his own story of Brave's rescue and recovery. His involvement brought him closer to others who shared his passion, further solidifying his place within the community. The smiles and gratitude he received from fellow volunteers and adopters filled him with a sense of belonging he had long forgotten. One evening, as Michael sat with Brave in the living room, he realized how much his life had changed. The house that once echoed with silence now resonated with the sounds of laughter and companionship. Brave's presence had not only filled the physical space, but it also healed the emotional void that Michael had carried for so long. The dog had become his anchor, a constant source of joy and motivation. As winter turned to spring, Brave fully recovered and was adopted by a loving family who had followed Michael's journey. Though Michael felt a pang of sadness at their departure, he was filled with pride and happiness knowing that Brave had found a forever home where he would be cherished. The farewell was bittersweet, but it reinforced the lesson Michael had learned. True compassion and kindness can create ripples of positive change, touching lives in ways one might never imagine. In the following months, Michael continued to engage with the animal rescue community, driven by the profound impact Brave had made on his life. He organized fundraising events, participated in awareness campaigns, and mentored new volunteers, sharing his experiences and encouraging others to take action. Each act of kindness reaffirmed his belief in the power of compassion and the importance of community support. One sunny afternoon, as Michael walked through the park with a new rescue dog he had recently adopted, he reflected on his journey of healing. The path had been challenging, filled with moments of fear and uncertainty, but it had ultimately led him to a place of hope and connection. The bond he shared with Brave had unlocked a part of himself that he thought was lost forever, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is light to be found through acts of love and kindness. Michael looked down at the joyful dog trotting beside him, eyes bright with curiosity and trust. He realized that his journey wasn't just about saving Brave, it was about saving himself. Through nurturing and caring for another life, he had discovered a renewed sense of purpose and a community that valued his presence. The loneliness that had once overshadowed his days was now replaced with meaningful relationships and the satisfaction of making a difference. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the park, Michael felt a deep sense of contentment. He had embarked on this journey alone, driven by a singular act of compassion, but he had found so much more along the way. Brave's rescue had been the catalyst for a transformation that had healed not only the dog, but also Michael's wounded heart. In that moment, Michael knew that his life had taken a turn for the better. The journey of healing was ongoing, filled with new challenges and joys, but he was no longer the lonely widower who had found solace in solitude. He was now a beacon of hope and compassion, inspiring others to act with kindness and empathy. And as he continued to walk through life with his loyal companion by his side, Michael embraced the future with open arms, grateful for the healing that had begun with one selfless act. Michael stood by the window, gazing out at the blooming flowers in his garden, the vibrant colors a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside him. Brave lay peacefully at his feet, his presence a comforting reminder of the bond they had forged over the past months. The journey they had embarked on together had transformed Michael from a lonely widower into a man reconnected with his community and purpose. Yet despite the deep affection he felt for the dog, a creeping realization began to take root in his mind. His age and declining health meant he couldn't continue to care for Brave indefinitely. The thought weighed heavily on Michael. He cherished the moments they shared, the early morning walks, the evenings spent by the fireplace, and the simple joy of having a companion after years of solitude. Brave had not only filled the void in his life, but had also given him a reason to engage with others and find joy again. However, the practicalities of his situation could no longer be ignored. His arthritis had worsened, making it increasingly difficult to take Brave on those long walks that had become the highlight of his days. Moreover, the visits from Dr. Ramirez revealed signs of his own declining health that couldn't be overlooked. Determined to make the right decision, Michael reached out to Dr. Ramirez at the veterinary clinic. They had developed a close relationship over Brave's recovery, and Michael trusted the veterinarian's judgment implicitly. Dr. Ramirez welcomed Michael warmly into her office, her desk cluttered with medical reports and veterinary journals. "Michael, it's good to see you," she greeted, her eyes filled with genuine concern. Michael took a deep breath, sitting down across from her. "Dr. Ramirez, I've been thinking a lot lately about Brave. I love him dearly, but I'm not sure I can continue to take care of him the way he deserves." Dr. Ramirez nodded understandingly, leaning forward to listen more closely. "I understand your concerns. Brave has come a long way, thanks to your dedication, but it's important to consider his long-term well-being. How are you feeling?" Michael sighed, feeling the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. "My health isn't what it used to be. My arthritis is getting worse and I find it harder to manage everyday tasks. I worry that I won't be able to give Brave the attention and care he needs." Dr. Ramirez placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've done an incredible job, Michael. Brave is a testament to your compassion. It's okay to seek help when you need it. We can work together to find the best solution for both of you." Together, they began the process of rehoming Brave. The clinic collaborated with local animal rescue organizations, creating a profile that highlighted Brave's resilience, gentle nature, and the unique bond he shared with Michael. They organized adoption events and reached out to the community, spreading the word about Brave's availability. One crisp Saturday morning, the veterinary clinic hosted an adoption fair, inviting families from the neighborhood to meet the animals in need of homes. Michael watched nervously as Brave was introduced to potential adopters, his heart swelling with hope at the sight of Brave interacting warmly with visitors. Among the attendees were Jessica and Ryan, a young couple who had recently lost their beloved dog and were seeking a new companion to fill the void in their hearts. Jessica, a soft-spoken woman with a gentle demeanor, approached Brave cautiously, extending a hand to let him sniff her fingers. Ryan, taller and more outgoing, knelt down beside her, their eyes meeting in a silent understanding. As they interacted, it became evident that Brave felt an immediate connection with them. His playful demeanor and affectionate gestures mirrored the love Jessica and Ryan had for their late pet. The couple shared their story with Michael, expressing their longing for the companionship that only a dog like Brave could provide. After several rounds of interviews and thorough screenings to ensure Jessica and Ryan were well suited to care for Brave, the decision was made. The couple was approved to adopt him, their genuine affection and commitment evident in every interaction. Michael felt a mix of emotions as he watched them bond with Brave, relief knowing he would be in good hands, and sadness at the impending farewell. The day of the farewell arrived with a bittersweet air. Michael arrived at the veterinary clinic early, Brave happily wagging his tail as he sensed the significance of the occasion. Jessica and Ryan were there, their eyes reflecting both joy and sadness. The exchange was heartfelt, filled with promises of love and care for Brave. Michael knelt down, placing a hand gently on Brave's head, feeling the dog's warmth and trust. "As you leave today, know that you're taking a bit of me with you," Michael said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Brave has brought so much joy into my life, and I know he'll bring the same to yours." Jessica reached out, her hand resting on Michael's shoulder. "Thank you, Michael. We've been looking for a companion like Brave for so long. We promise to take good care of him." Ryan nodded, his eyes misting over. "He's perfect for us. We'll make sure he feels loved and appreciated every day." As Jessica and Ryan led Brave out of the clinic and into their car, Michael felt a lump in his throat. "You'll be happy with them," he whispered, his voice tinged with emotion. "They'll take great care of you." Brave looked back at Michael, his eyes conveying a silent understanding and gratitude. Michael's heart ached with the weight of the farewell, but he found solace in knowing that Brave would now be surrounded by a new family who cherished him. Walking back to his home, Michael felt a strange mixture of loss and hope. The act of rehoming Brave had been one of the most difficult decisions he had ever made, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. He realized that his journey with Brave had not only been about saving a dog, but also about reclaiming his place within the community and finding purpose beyond his own solitude. In the weeks that followed, Michael threw himself into community activities with renewed enthusiasm. He volunteered at the animal shelter, sharing his experience and helping other animals find loving homes. His interactions with neighbors became more meaningful, filled with shared stories and mutual support. The once oppressive loneliness that had clouded his days began to lift, replaced by a sense of belonging and connection. One sunny afternoon, as Michael walked through the park with a new rescue dog he had recently adopted, he reflected on his journey of healing. The path had been challenging, filled with moments of fear and uncertainty, but it had ultimately led him to a place of hope and connection. The bond he shared with Brave had unlocked a part of himself that he thought was lost forever, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is light to be found through acts of love and kindness. Michael looked down at the joyful dog trotting beside him, eyes bright with curiosity and trust. He realized that his journey wasn't just about saving Brave, it was about saving himself. Through nurturing and caring for another life, he had discovered a renewed sense of purpose and a community that valued his presence. The loneliness that had once overshadowed his days was now replaced with meaningful relationships and the satisfaction of making a difference. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the park, Michael felt a deep sense of contentment. He had embarked on this journey alone, driven by a singular act of compassion, but he had found so much more along the way. Brave's rescue had been the catalyst for a transformation that had healed not only the dog, but also Michael's wounded heart. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Michael found himself becoming a familiar face at the animal shelter, his presence always accompanied by a warm smile and an eagerness to help. He shared Brave's story with anyone who would listen, emphasizing the importance of compassion and the impact one person can have on another's life. His dedication inspired others to volunteer more actively, creating a ripple effect of kindness throughout the community. One evening, as Michael was closing up the shelter, he received a call from Dr. Ramirez. "Michael, I have some good news. Jessica and Ryan have come back to the clinic. They want to thank you personally for Brave." Curious and pleased, Michael agreed to meet them at the clinic the following day. When he arrived, Jessica and Ryan were waiting, along with Brave, who seemed eager to see him again. The reunion was filled with warmth and gratitude, the couple expressing how Brave had seamlessly integrated into their lives, bringing joy and companionship when they needed it most. "Brave has been incredible," Jessica said, her eyes shining with happiness. "He's helped us heal after losing our dog. We can't thank you enough for giving us this gift. Ryan nodded in agreement. He's more than just a pet to us. He's family. Michael felt a tear slip down his cheek, moved by their genuine appreciation. I'm so glad to hear that. It means a lot to know that Brave is in a loving home where he's cherished. As they sat together, sharing stories about Brave's antics and the new memories they were creating, Michael realized how interconnected their lives had become. What began as a desperate rescue mission had evolved into a network of support, love, and mutual respect. Later that week, the community organized a small gathering in the park to celebrate the successful adoption of Brave and to honor Michael's contributions. Friends, neighbors, and fellow volunteers attended, bringing food, drinks, and a sense of camaraderie that Michael had come to cherish. During the event, Jessica and Ryan approached Michael, holding a framed photo of Brave playing in their backyard. We wanted to give you something to remember us by, Jessica said, handing him the photo. Thank you for everything. Michael accepted the gift, his heart swelling with emotion. Thank you both. It means the world to me. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Michael stood with his new rescue dog, watching as neighbors mingled and shared laughter. He felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that his efforts had not only saved a life, but had also strengthened the bonds within his community. In the following months, Michael continued to be an advocate for animal welfare, speaking at local schools and community centers about the importance of kindness and responsibility towards animals. His story resonated deeply with many, inspiring others to take similar actions in their own lives. The once insular man had become a pillar of the community, his experiences serving as a beacon of hope and change. One crisp autumn day, Michael received an invitation to speak at a regional animal welfare conference. It was an honor he never expected, a testament to the impact of his actions. Standing before an audience of like-minded individuals, Michael shared his journey, from the depths of loneliness to the heights of community engagement. He spoke about Brave, the dog who had changed his life, and the countless others who had found new beginnings through acts of compassion. After his speech, a young woman approached him, her eyes bright with admiration. Mr. Thompson, your story is truly inspiring. It gave me the courage to adopt my first rescue dog. Thank you for being a role model. Michael smiled, humbled by her words. Thank you. I'm glad my story could help. Remember, every act of kindness makes a difference. As he left the conference center, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. His journey with Brave had opened doors he never knew existed, leading him to a life filled with meaningful connections and the knowledge that he was making a positive impact on the world around him. Back at home, Michael and his new dog Max settled into a comfortable routine. Max was a spirited border collie with a zest for life, a stark contrast to the quiet resilience of Brave. Together, they explored the neighborhood, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Max's energy and enthusiasm reminded Michael of the importance of embracing the present and looking forward to the future. One evening, as Michael sat on his porch with Max lying contentedly by his side, he reflected on how far he had come. The house that once echoed with silence was now filled with laughter, stories, and the pitter-patter of paws. The garden, once a neglected corner of his home, was now a vibrant display of colors and life, tended to with care and attention. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional and spiritual as well. Michael felt a sense of peace and fulfillment that he hadn't experienced in years. The decision to rehome Brave, though painful, had been the catalyst for his own healing, teaching him that letting go can sometimes lead to new beginnings. As spring approached, bringing with it new growth and renewal, Michael organized a community garden project. It was a vision born from his own journey of healing, bringing people together, fostering connections, and creating something beautiful through collective effort. The project saw volunteer after volunteer contributing their time and energy, the garden blossoming into a symbol of unity and hope. One sunny afternoon, as Michael planted a row of tulips alongside his neighbors, Jessica and Ryan joined him, bringing Brave's old collar as a memento. We thought it would be nice to have something from Brave as a part of the garden, Jessica said, her eyes filled with affection. Michael accepted the gift, placing it carefully in the soil. It's perfect. Brave's spirit will live on here, reminding us all of the importance of kindness and community. As they worked together, Michael felt a profound connection to those around him. The garden became a place where stories were shared, friendships were forged, and memories were made. It was a tangible representation of the journey he had undertaken, a journey from isolation to integration, from sorrow to joy. One evening, as the sun set behind the blooming rows of flowers, Michael sat back on his porch, watching Max chase fireflies in the fading light. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, a perfect end to another fulfilling day. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the experiences he had gained and the people he had met along the way. The decision to rehome Brave had been the hardest yet most rewarding choice Michael had ever made. It had opened pathways to healing, connection, and a life filled with purpose beyond his own needs. Brave had been the spark that ignited a transformation, not just for Michael, but for the entire community. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Michael whispered a silent thank you to Brave, knowing that their bond would forever be a part of his life. The journey wasn't over, but Michael was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. With Max by his side and a community that cared, he was ready to embrace the future with open arms, confident that together they could overcome any challenge and continue to spread the light of compassion and kindness. In the quiet moments of the night, as Michael gazed at the stars, he realized that the true essence of life lay in the connections we make and the love we share. Brave had not only changed his life, but it also inspired a chain reaction of goodness that touched countless others. The garden, the shelter, the community, they were all living testaments to the power of one man's decision to act with empathy and courage. And so, as the nights grew longer and the seasons continued to turn, Michael found himself surrounded by love, friendship, and the enduring legacy of Brave's spirit. The once lonely widower had become a beacon of hope and compassion, guiding others to find their own paths of healing and fulfillment. With each passing day, he embraced the promise of new beginnings, knowing that his journey was just one of many threads in the rich tapestry of life.